Okay, so today we are talking about how to solve for circumference. If you remember, we've already talked about circumference. We've defined it. It's part of our circle. So if we draw our circle, the circumference is the distance around that circle. So it's essentially the perimeter of the circle is what we are solving for today. To find the circumference, if you look on your formula chart, they give you two formulas. One of the formulas that they give you is C equals pi d, which is just the number pi times the diameter of the circle. So times the distance of the circle from one endpoint to the other going through the center. Or you can find it by doing circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius. And the reason that you can do that formula is because if you remember when we solved for diameter given radius, all we had to do was multiply the radius times 2, because twice the length of the radius gives you the diameter, which is why either formula works. Now, pi, unless they tell you specifically what to use for pi, pi equals 3.14 approximately. So, in the examples they give us, we're trying to solve for circumference, but they do not give us pi. In the event that they do not give us pi, we use 3.14. So, the first example they give us is a circle with a radius of 4. So, I'm going to use the radius formula. So my formula I'm going to write, and all the steps that I do, you need to make sure that you are writing out. If you just slap down a number, you will not get credit. So we are trying to find the circumference is 2 times pi times the radius. So now we're going to rewrite our formula with our numbers plugged in. So we do C equals 2 times 3.14, which is pi, times the radius of 4. And then you just simply follow your order of operations. So the first thing you would do would be 2 times 3.14, sorry. So you have C equals 6.28 times 4. And when you multiply those together, you should get that your circumference is equal to 25.12 centimeters. And it is just centimeters because it's essentially the perimeter of the circle. It is not the area. So if this were a circular backyard, that means that the amount of fencing that they would need would be 25.12. Obviously this isn't a backyard because those are centimeters unless it's a backyard for a mouse. So moving on to the second example. The second example they give you, they tell you that the diameter, the entire length of the circle from one endpoint to the other, is 12. So since they give us the diameter instead of the radius, we are going to use our diameter formula. So again, I'm going to start off by writing my formula is C equals pi d, and then I'm going to fill in the information given. So I'm looking for the circumference. We know that pi is 3.14. and our diameter is 12. I'm sorry I'm having to squeeze these numbers. So now, instead of multiplying 3 numbers like we did when we were solving for radius, we're only having to multiply by 2 numbers. And when you multiply 3.14 times 12, you should get 37.68 meters as the circumference of that circle. Obviously, when you guys do it, you would actually show out your multiplication, but for the purpose of time, I'm writing out the answers. Alright, now let's move on to examples 3 and 4. It's really, really important in this unit that we are highlighting. I mean, it is always important, but it's especially important that we are highlighting, underlining, using all of our test-taking strategies to make sure that we know what the information is asking for and what is given. So, the first thing that it says in question number 3, they tell us that the radius of the circle is 2.1 inches. So I'm going to highlight that, and I'm just going to write on top that my radius is 2.1. Then it's asking me to find the circumference. So we do not know what the circumference is. That is what we are looking for. And this is one of the examples I was talking about where it tells us that we can use 3 for pi instead of using 3.14. Yay, this is good news because we do not like multiplying by decimals. So, since it's given me the radius, the circumference formula I want to use is c equals 2 pi r. So the circumference is 2. We're going to plug in 3 for pi because that's what our problem told us to use, times the radius, which is 2.1. And then, again, we're following our order of operations to solve. So we do 2 times 3, which gives us 6. So then I have 6 times 2.1, and when we multiply those together, we get that our circumference equals 12.6 inches. Super duper easy. All it is identifying key pieces of information and multiplying. Do not psych yourself out because of the big words. That's why we're taking out the key bits of information and simplifying them down so we don't get overwhelmed by the wording. Okay, in the fourth example, they give us the diameter. So this time, instead of r, we have d. So d equals 7.5. They want us to calculate the circumference, so we do not know what the circumference is. And we get to use 3 for pi. Yay, no decimals. Alright, so this time, since they give us our diameter, we are going to use the circumference formula that is just pi times our diameter. So then we're just going to plug in our numbers. So c equals 3, because that's what they told us to use for pi, times our diameter of 7.5. And now all we have to do is multiply. So when you multiply those two together, you get that the circumference is 22.5 inches. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Alright, now let's move on to the last two examples that we have, 5 and 6. Alright, so these are trickier than just the ones that we've been doing. Number 5 says the circumference of a circle is 112.8 millimeters. So this time they give us the circumference. So they told us that the circumference is 112.8 millimeters. And we're calculating the diameter. So we do not know what the diameter is. And then again, it says that you get to use 3 for pi. So we have that pi equals 3. So we're going to set it up like we did before. So since they give us our diameter, we have c equals pi times d. This time, instead of plugging in for diameter, since we don't know it, we can plug in our circumference that they give us. So I have 112.8 equals 3, because that's what they told us to use for pi, and then I'm going to leave the d as a variable like that. So in order to get that diameter, the d by itself, you need to do the inverse operation. So before we were multiplying pi and diameter, and this time we need to divide them to figure out what our diameter, or we need to divide our pi by our circumference to figure out what that diameter is. So I'm going to divide by 3 on this side, cross them out, divide by 3 on this side. So when I do 112.8 divided by 3, that gives me that my diameter equals 37.6 millimeters. So that means the distance from one endpoint of the circle to the other going through the center is 37.6 millimeters. And you guys could test it out by plugging in the diameter back into the formula, multiplying 3 times 37.6 to see if you get that circumference that was originally given. Alright, and then the last one, it says on the playground at Sparks, the tire swing has a circumference of 28.8 inches. Again, they give us our circumference. And this time it is also asking us to calculate the diameter. So again, we're looking, and they tell us again to use 3 for pi. Do not get used to using 3 for pi, because if they do not tell you, you will have to use 3.14. Alright, and again, the formula we'll be using is C equals pi d, and then let's plug in the numbers. They give us 28.8 for our circumference equals 3 times d, and then in order to isolate the variable, we need to divide by 3 on both sides. So going back to solving our equations, which you guys were rock stars at, and then when you divide 28.8 by 3, the diameter of the circle is 9.6 inches. And again, if you wanted to check it, you could plug that back in for circumference. You could do 3 times 9.6. And then when you do 3 times 9.6, you get 28.8, which is the circumference that was originally given. So you did it. Yay!